Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you doing, Ken?
Exceptionally well. Always glad to be here, Rory. And we have a cracking episode 138 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. That's what you're listening to. We're kicking off with our intro topic today, which is the id, ego, and the superego. Always a topic that comes up again and again. Then we're going to have our check-in with CPCAB. And today, I believe you spoke with Heather Price, Rory, and you spoke about progression routes. Kind of what do you do when you get to the end of your level 2 course or the end of the level 3 course or the end of your level 4 course? What are those progression routes? Can you give us a flavour of what we can expect?
Absolutely. I mean, Heather outlined very clearly why it's so important to choose wisely when you're looking for a training provider and an awarding body. Indeed.
Looking forward to that one. And then our final topic today is our section called Practice Matters, where we delve into the world of practice for our qualified practitioners. Of course, students, this is useful for you as well as you kind of plan your journey forward. But today we're going to be speaking about a hot topic, definitely here in the UK. It's called Adverse Childhood Experiences. Rory's done a super duper lecture on this, but we're going to be delving into that a little bit. But let's start off, Rory, with a bit of a joke for you. So it's the ego and the superego walk into a bar and they order beers and the bartender says, "Show me your ID." "You're it."
Boom.
Boom, boom.
We'll let you know, Ken. So we'll let you know. So yes, it's one of those topics that is an evergreen one. It keeps coming up in our Facebook page. And if you don't know where our Facebook page is, you go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor. You'll find we're a closed group. If you knock on the door, of course we're going to let you in, and you'll be with thousands of like-minded people, students. We've got qualified practitioners. We've also got supervisors and some tutors in there, all talking about the world of counselling and psychotherapy. So come in, join the party. We want to see you there. And this is a topic that's come up in our Facebook page, the id, the ego, and the superego. And we've not long had a Christmas break, and I'm sure that the id, ego, and the superego came into play. And I'm very grateful to a colleague of mine, Glenys Arthur, who gave us the cake analogy. So, if you're thinking about the id, the ego, and the superego, which was, in fact, Freud's idea of our subconscious process, our desires that were going on, the conflicts that were going on in our subconscious. If you think of, having a chocolate cake, if you like sweet stuff, if you like chocolate, and the id is saying, "Give me all that cake, I want to eat all that cake." And the superego is saying, "If you eat all that cake, you'll be unhealthy, you may be overweight, you may have heart problems," and gives you a bit of a lecture on the dangers of overeating cake. And the poor old ego is that little person in the middle who's trying to mediate between the desires, those kind of childish desires, and the desire of kind of keeping society happy. And the ego kind of mediates and says, "Well, we'll have a little piece of cake, but maybe what we'll do is we'll have some salad for tea." And that is a very basic and easy to understand little analogy about the ego states. And I think it's really interesting. And there was someone who wrote called Linda Sliegman, who said that the id could be a biological side of us, that part of our body that kind of just immediately goes into overdrive when we see things that we like. And the ego is the psychological component, that part of the brain that kind of mediates and says, "No, we can't spend all our money on fast cars and expensive meals." And the superego may be influenced by our social surroundings, our peers, society we live in. So it really is interesting, Ken. And it's even more interesting how they work with it in analysis.
Yeah, it is. It's when I think of the id, the ego, the superego, it's as you've described it, Rory. It's kind of like three little people living inside us, all with little different personalities. One is that little child jumping up and down saying, "Let's do it, let's eat that cake." When you were talking about the cake, Rory, I was drooling. My id was definitely kicking off there. That superego is maybe the more judgmental sign, and I know I can relate to that in terms of I very often find a little voice inside my head telling me what I should do, what I shouldn't do, kind of criticizing me and being that kind of judge. I see it as wearing this wig and sitting with a little gavel that it bangs. And then, of course, as you said, the poor ego, which is kind of, I guess, our more conscious way of thinking, where we sit in the middle and we've got to kind of mediate, make those decisions. And it's interesting because we run as part of our paid for membership. So we have the free stuff like this podcast, and we've got loads of free stuff on our website, counsellingtutor.com. Always go there. We've got our Facebook group, which is free as well. But we do offer a premium service, which is kind of, we call it Counselling Study Resource. It's for students, it's for qualified counsellors, where we do CPD presentations and we present learning resources. But we also have once a week a discussion group, and we invite questions in from our members. And we meet once a week, we get together, it's like a big party. People come with their questions and we discuss it. And one of the questions that came in recently was regarding the id, ego and superego, and how similar that is to transactional analysis, where you have the parent, the adult, the child. And the question, Rory, was, which came first? And is there a similarity or is there a parallel between the two?
Yes, I think it's an interesting one, and I think it's one that sometimes gets misdirected. Freud believed that this was our subconscious process. In other words, it was something that was out of our awareness and could only be worked within what was called free association, where you lay on a couch and you just talk about anything that comes into your head. And the idea is that the stuff that's going on for you will come out in free association. And he also talks about our dreams being the kind of battleground between the id and the superego. It comes out in our dreams where we cannot mediate it consciously. So there's a lot of dream works. In fact, Freud called it the royal road to working out what was going on for people, because our dreams are kind of unregulated. We don't have any input into them. But in terms of a comparison between the work of Eric Berne was more a cognitive state. So Eric Berne started really as a cognitive psychologist or a cognitive practitioner, and he would write parent, adult, and child, and he would ask people to consciously think where they were at. So there's a slight difference. Berne's was more a cognitive approach, actually laying it out to the client and asking people where they were in terms of communication with people, and that's important, where Freud thought it was more a subconscious battle that went on. So they are different, Ken.
Yeah, that's great. And thank you very much for that answer. And hopefully that answers that question that came in. And if you're listening to this and you are a member of our paid for resources, look out in your inbox, because we send those invites out once a week, and make sure you take some time to join one of those discussion groups. We kind of vary them. It's a kind of a round robin. We do on a Monday, the next week we'll do a Tuesday, the next week we'll do a Wednesday, because we know that not everyone can make every day. But come and join one, because this is how useful it is. You get your questions answered. We didn't pre-script this, Rory. That question just came at you, and those are the kind of answers and the kind of insight that you get. So any more on the id, ego, superego, Rory?
Well, apart from the fact that we have a super handout, we always say they're super handouts because they are. And how do you get that handout? Well, if you go to Counselling Tutor, which is our website, our mother website, click the podcast tab, find podcast 138, and that handout is ready for you. Just click on it, download it into your inbox. And it outlines a lot more about the id, the ego, and the superego. And there's some really good references in there as well, so make sure you get that.
And it's free. Yeah, a super handout, super ego, parallels, more parallels. Right, moving away from that onto our next topic we call check-in with CPCAB. We partnered up with CPCAB because we both believe in the same thing, and that is kind of helping students along their journey. Rory, you met up and spoke about progression routes. This is a question that comes up again and again and again.
Yes, I mean, I've said this once and I'll say it again. In terms of training, certainly here in England, it's a little bit different in Scotland, but in England, it's a bit of a dog's dinner. There are huge amounts of training courses out there, and we get lots of comments in the Facebook group about people who've started on one course and find they can't go on to another course because the learning outcomes on the course they've previously done doesn't match the progression routes of the next course. So Heather kind of very, very succinctly lays out what you should be looking for when you're thinking of maybe joining that first course and how that might link up with the rest of the courses. And what CPCAB CPCAB are very good at is they've got a whole course suite. There are other awarding bodies with course suites, and a course suite is just a number of qualifications that link together. But you have to be very, very thoughtful that maybe if you do one qualification and hop onto another qualification pathway, they may not meet. So it's food for thought, and certainly if you're thinking of progression, it's not to be missed, really.
Check in with CPCAB.
Heather's going to be talking about progression routes. Now, I think before we start, we need to say that this is CPCAB specific. Other awarding bodies have different progression routes. But if you are on any course, some of the routes might map. People go from level 3 or certificate to diploma. But we are going to be talking today about CPCAB specific routes. So what is the route map with CPCAB courses, Heather?
Well, CPCAB over the years have worked hard to maintain a consistent pathway, I guess you would call it, from people who might start with us at level 2 and maybe want to go right through the levels up to level 6 supervision. And we do know that students sometimes begin their journey not knowing how far it's going to take them, and maybe think, I'll just go and do an introductory course, or I'll just go and do a skills course, and then find when they want to progress to the next level, maybe that's not offered in their training institution or in their locality, or they find they've studied somewhere on a qualification which actually doesn't then fit nicely into the next step. So at CPCAB, we've always worked hard to try and have that whole series of steps right the way through the progression ladder. So I guess students mostly are going to be starting at one of the level 2s. It may be a small level 2, like a listening skills, effective listening skills, which we call an award because it's only 15 guided learning hours. Or they may start at the next level up, which is a certificate. And I guess that's probably our most common one, a certificate in counselling skills. And that tends to run over a year in most institutions, not always, but about that sort of length of time, part-time. I think it's important to say all the qualifications are delivered part-time. Sometimes students ring up and say, well, I want to do it quickly. I want to get it over with. Can I do it full-time? And usually we would say, well, no, because you need that processing time and time to work on the skills. And so although theoretically you could bunch it all together, that's not actually a good idea.
No. And I think you make a very, very good point. Learning to be a counsellor or developing your counselling journey into being qualified isn't like any other academic endeavour. It needs time to pause and reflect and to bring who you are to the learning. And this isn't always best served, I don't think, as a former lecturer by doing it as quick as possible. I think to develop a therapist, you need time to reflect and and grow as a person. But I do acknowledge that people want to move their lives on, so it is a bit of a balance.
That's right. So I think the message to students is to think carefully about the first course that you're going to do. And you may well just do one course and stop there, and that's absolutely fine. But if you do think you might want to go on through the progression ladder, then it's worth looking at the institution that you study at for your first qualification to see what they offer next, or if there's another training place near to you that offers the next level, the next step up. Otherwise, you could be left stranded with a qualification and kind of nowhere to go with it. And unfortunately, the qualifications across different awarding bodies don't always match nicely. And so you might find you've got to go back a little bit in order to go forwards again. And that, of course, takes more time and more money. So from our level 2 certificate, that's the counselling skills, which is 90 hours, but it's usually done on a 3-hour class once a week. Then a student might want to progress to the level 3, which is more about preparation for agency work, preparation for real client work. So the level 2 is very much about learning a set of skills that could be used anywhere with people. It's not counselling as such, but the student is learning counselling skills which are transferable. They're learning a little bit about themselves and how they tick, and a little bit of theory that backs up those skills. The next level then takes it all a step further, so it looks at a range of theories. Students build on their skills, they continue to look at themselves and build up their self-awareness, that they also begin to look at agencies in their area that offer counselling, how these work, what the ethics and the legalities are of actually working with real clients. And that's a similar length course to the level 2.
Yes, so I think there's lots of step-off points in counselling skills. I think we have to acknowledge not everybody wants to become a counsellor. So it may be one course suits someone who maybe wants to go into social work or works in a profession where counselling skills are used. I remember training a radiologist many years ago who had to deliver quite bad news to people after doing x-rays. And she wanted a portfolio of skills to be able to develop and give that news in a sensitive and thoughtful way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. The courses are open to people of all walks of life. Really, anybody who works with other people are going to find the skills really useful at levels 2 and 3. Then if they want to put them to a more professional use, they're looking at level 3 and probably level 4. So level 4 is where there's a real difference, where actually it's practitioner training. So it's training the student to become a counselling practitioner over 2 years. So this is our longest course. Again, it's part-time, different modes of delivery. Some places run it 1 day a week. Some might run it over one long evening a week, starting late afternoon. Some places run it on a Saturday. Some run it on a Friday and a Saturday, say once a month. There are different patterns. So it's worth finding out in your local training institute how they deliver it to see what suits you. So the level 4 is the one where there's probably most work, in that students also have to then do 100 hours of client work in their agency that they've chosen, and go to the corresponding supervision, and take part in personal therapy, their own therapy, as well as doing the written work for the course itself. So I guess at that stage, students have to be quite committed. They have to know that's what they really want to do.
Absolutely, and at that point, of course, somebody is committed to be a therapist. Moving into the level 4, that is that's a kind of implicit kind of step into saying, I want to work with clients, I want to do clients work.
Yes.
And being committed to that, and it is a big commitment. The diploma is kind of life-changing, because you've got lots of different elements. You've got to have a placement, you're on personal therapy, you've got the class hours, and of course the study as well. So yes, it is a big piece of work.
Yeah, it is. And then beyond that, students may want to progress to a level 5. CPCAB has 2 level 5s. They're each of 1 year duration, again part-time. We have a CBT level 5 for students who want to begin to specialise. And we have a PCL5, a psychotherapeutic counselling level 5, for students who want to deepen work in the area that they've started at level 4. So there's 2 different strands there, depending on what it is that they want and how they want to see their skills and their career develop. These are not quite so widely available across the country, but they are available. Some colleges and training places only run them every other year because the demand is not as great as it is for, say, level 4. And then beyond that, students would usually probably have a bit of a gap where they build up their client hours and then think about going into supervision. So we're looking at someone there who's more experienced, has got a lot of client hours under their belt, lots of experience, and then is able to supervise other counselling professionals. And so we've got a level 6. Again, it's a 1 year course where students have to be not necessarily in an agency, but they need to be in a position where they can offer supervision to other counsellors.
Yes. So I think what's really becoming clear here is that the CPCAB offer is very modular and it's progressive, so that people can start. They can decide what suits them. They can come off, say maybe at level 2, having gained a slight amount of skills and apply them. Then they can carry on to level 3, which means they may be using skills in their everyday work. Level 4, they are trained to become a qualified practitioner, and then as we move through that, then people could either look at specialising or developing a deeper understanding of the theories and practice base. And I also think, if I remember correctly, there's something around being a independent practitioner in the level 5 as well.
Yeah, that's right. The PCL5, the psychotherapeutic counselling, it is also targeted towards those who want to set up their own independent practice, again as a step on from level 4. And then it's also worth pointing out that at level 5 we have a partnership with the OU, the Open University. So anyone who has done the CPCAB level 4, and it does have to be the CPCAB level 4, can then look at adding on one of our level 5s and or doing a range of OU modules in their own time in order to gain a foundation degree. And that's a very useful link that we've had for the last few years.
All right, so link with the Open University. So for those people who want a degree, feel that maybe a degree is important for career progression or for their own, to deepen their own understanding, that's available at the end, but only if you've done the CPCAB level 5.
Level 4.
Level 4.
Level 4, yeah. So that's an option there for people to take up at any other time. They can do it whilst they're doing a level 5 or afterwards, whatever, whenever they've done our level 4.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that the CPCAB offer a real comprehensive route to whatever someone wants to achieve. They may just want to achieve a level 2, or they can go right through, become a supervisor, deepen their understanding, go into private practice. But I also heard you say that it might be that finding people to provide the level 5, maybe you may have to look around because it's only maybe run every other year. So it really is a comprehensive suite, I think is the word, suite of qualifications.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Well, Heather, thank you very much. I think that's going to answer a lot of questions. I know my postbag gets full of people asking me, well, what's the progression route? How do you progress? What level can you do this with? What level can you do that with? And I think you've answered that quite succinctly. And of course, as we said at the beginning, this really is only for people who do CPCAB courses. If you're doing another awarding bodies course or a university course, almost certainly they will have a different progression route. But from a CPCAB perspective, I think you've showcased the qualifications wonderfully, Heather, if I may say so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Check-in with CPCAB is proudly sponsored by CPCAB, the only awarding body run by counsellors for counsellors. To learn more about CPCAB qualifications and to get more detailed information on today's podcast topic, visit cpcab.co.uk.
Well, I think that lays it out pretty succinctly, Ken. And I think it's really useful to have a really good overview when you're thinking of starting on your counselling career and thinking about who you're going to go with and what progression routes they've got. It's not just your training provider that provides the training, the progression routes. It's the awarding body. And as Heather said, you start at 2, finish at 6. And in fact, they've got links to a university as well. So the CPCAB have got a complete path from not knowing anything about counselling to qualifying and higher education qualifications as well. And it's reassuring to know, I think.
Indeed, it is. So, moving away, I guess, from the student life more to our qualified practitioners, we go into our section called Practice Matters.
Practice Matters.
Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by Backpack. Backpack is a user-friendly client management software product designed especially for counsellors and psychotherapists. Get a 30-day free trial of Backpack and 30% discount by using the discount code CT2020. www.backpack.co.uk. www.bac-pac.co.uk. Today we are discussing the topic of adverse childhood experiences, or I think it's also known, abbreviated down as an acronym to ACEs, Rory.
It is, and we have our American colleagues to thank for this huge amount of research. What the Americans are really good at is real massive research programs. And ACEs was developed by, interestingly enough, the Center of Disease Control in America. Now, the Center of Disease Control is the organization that looks after contagious diseases and monitors illnesses such as flu or influenza viruses, or, you know, in the worst case scenario, biological illnesses caused by terrorism and that type of thing. And they identified that children who had very, very poor early childhood experiences were more liable to have poorer health as they got older, and life-limiting health. And they link it to the new ideas in neuroscience that if the brain doesn't if the brain isn't nurtured as a child, and there's a lot of trauma in a child's life, then it affects their immune system, and they're more likely to have early onset of diseases such as cancer, heart attacks. The list is endless. And I think it's really important that certainly practitioners who are working with children understand what ACEs are and the ACE score is, because this is something that's being rolled out into UK schools now. And it's not unusual for a child that's had a very, very difficult background, early life, to maybe have an ACE score, and that might be passed on to the practitioner. And I think it's useful to understand the higher the ACE score, the more difficult the background of the child has been.
Yeah, it is. It just, I guess, once again highlights the importance of research and how we can learn, develop and grow as practitioners from research, and the importance of continuing professional development, just kind of that continuous learning, knowing what's happening, knowing what the research is saying, and knowing how to act to that research. And again, I'm going to mention we've got a paid for service, but recently we've made a change to that where we've kind of angled it more to qualified practitioners and professionals. So we still have our counselling study resources for our students, but we've created a whole section of online CPD where we have CPD lectures for qualified practitioners, and they're valid for 1.5 hours of CPD certification. I'm tripping up with my words now. And Rory, you did an entire lecture on ACEs, which was very, very well received. Had a lot of interest in that. So if you're interested in our CPD provision, just go to counsellingtutor.com. All the information is on our website. But it reminds me of another question that came in from our weekly discussions groups, Rory. It's just a fresh one in. You haven't seen it yet. And it was a practitioner who's saying, you know, they're interested in working with adults, but seeing that the childhood trauma, how that has influenced the adult, you know, and they're working with the adult. And the question was around, how can I understand how to work with this person, taking into consideration those childhood experiences, and do those childhood experiences, affect what I see in that adult in my therapy room?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, there's a number of early adversity. It has lasting impacts, and it can be things like depression, anxiety, suicide, post-traumatic stress, unintended pregnancy, HIV and AIDS, cancer and diabetes. Sadly, people with a high ACE score are likely to have alcohol and drug misuse issues and unsafe sex. And of course, ultimately, all those impact on education and occupation and socio-economic well-being. In other words, how well people can earn their living in the world. So it is really, really important. And also, I think it links into something that's becoming a lot bigger now in the world of counselling and psychotherapy, and that's neuroscience and psychological education. You know, I recently undertook a certificate in trauma-informed practice, and more and more organisations are asking for qualifications or CPD on trauma-informed practice, and an ACE, understanding the ACEs and the ACE score comes under that umbrella.
Yeah, indeed. And again, it kind of just points to that working, if you're working with youth, if you're working with young people, it's a specialism. It's not something you can graduate, you can have your diploma, go out as a counsellor and start working with young people. There's a lot to learn, there's a lot to understand, there's a lot of CPD courses are out there, the support is out there, but it is a very special client group, I guess, and we need to be informed. We need to be working within our competences. Just a fantastic topic. What one last thing on ACEs, Rory?
Well, I think that it's just so important to investigate it, because we're seeing more and more people now, certainly in this Me Too environment, where people are now feeling freer to talk about what's happened to them as children. People sometimes say to me, how come there's more people disclosing abuse than ever before? And the answer to that is really simple. We have an environment, both in our legal system and in our social mores, that it is acceptable for people to disclose what's going on for them, either in the here and now or historically. And of course, that links very, very strongly to adverse childhood experiences. We're seeing more adults who've had adverse childhood experiences. So it's essential that people understand the impact and are able to better understand their clients, which is what CPD is all about.
Indeed it is. And if you're interested in our CPD provision, you're a qualified practitioner, check out CounsellingTutor.com. This has been episode 138 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. We started out by speaking about the id, the ego, the superego. We then had our check-in with CPCAB, where Rory, you met up and spoke about progression routes. And then we've, of course, ended by speaking about adverse childhood experiences.
And as always, hey, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit CounsellingTutor.com. That's CounsellingTutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.